What's going on, legends? Lilith here, and we've got a slightly different video than usual today. This has been requested a bunch, and I feel as someone with a lot of time in this character that I should explain a few things regarding the recent Hugtech situation. There is a ton of misunderstanding and misinformation when it comes to the Hugtech, so I'm here to set the record straight on what a Hugtech is, why they're used, and why I believe removing them would not only make the game less fun for both survivors and killers, but also lead to a higher kill rate as a character. The Hugtech allows Blight players to slide along objects and navigate around them rather than bumping. This can be in the form of a flick you're lining up, to catch a survivor off guard, or as I'll get back to later in the video, to give players an easier yet less efficient method to move around the map. This whole discussion started when a forum manager over on the Behavior website made the claim that internally the Hugtech is considered a bug and will be fixed. To address this point quickly, we don't know exactly what this means. No developer has spoken on exactly what, if anything, they would do to modify the Hugtech, and classifying something as a bug doesn't necessarily imply that it's a bad thing. In fact, many things that are considered bugs or exploits actually develop and become a charm to a game. Take the rocket ride from Fortnite, or strafe movement in Quake. Neither of these were intended features but ended up becoming a staple of the games. In fact, an even more extreme example are combos in fighting games. If you've ever played Tekken, Mortal Kombat, or any fighting game that includes combos, this originated as an exploit in Street Fighter 2, which allowed players to pull off move after move with the timing of only a single frame. Back to Dead by Daylight, there are many features in the game that are widely accepted as correct, such as spinning a killer. Specifically, I'm talking about rapidly rotating your camera in the opposite direction as you spin to increase your turn velocity and cause the killer to miss. As a game that predominantly begun as a stealth game, this is quite obviously not an intended mechanic, but does it add charm to the game? Absolutely. Both sides can appreciate these things as they require skill, timing, and effort to pull off. Do I feel like the Hugtech is problematic and worth removing? Not in the slightest. In fact, I believe it'd be a terrible design decision to remove something that is mostly used for fun hits, unique movement, and ultimately something that provides more counterplay on both sides. Let's go over some of the most common arguments I hear people mention when discussing Hugtechs. They're uncounterable, they take no skill, and fixing them will make Blight slippery collision more tolerable. I'll address that last point quickly as it's a really easy one. The Hugtech is not something you can do accidentally. If you rush into the side of a shack wall on Autohaven and slide off of it, or a pile of snow on Omen, you did not do a Hugtech. That's just the game having areas or objects that are slippery that skilled players will learn to use to their advantage. A Hugtech is an intentional move where the Blight will bump into an object, move themselves during slam duration towards it, and then look down to start the slide. Removing the Hugtech will do nothing to fix Blight's slippery collision. If anything, only make areas sizably more frustrating for newer Blight players. Hugtechs are uncounterable. Firstly, the Hugtech is very noticeable from a distance. You can clearly see them bump into an object, slowly move towards it and watch their head drop, which takes close to a second to perform. This is more than enough time to realize what they're doing and move to an area out of danger. All the Hugtech will allow them to do is get around the completely flat object and try to hit you on the other side. If there is a bump in the object or a completely separate object next to it, the Blight will collide with that instead and the area is now completely safe. This allows skilled survivors to not only completely counter this, but also punish the Blight by letting them miss their attack and enter fatigue. If you find yourself near a small box and don't have time to react to where the Blight's coming from, that's more of a positioning issue and ultimately the Blight probably deserved the hits. Secondly, a lot of people seem to forget that the Hugtech wasn't a thing until 4.7.1. Did Blight players absolutely suck until this patch released because they couldn't Hugtech? Not in the slightest. In fact, I'd argue they were even stronger than they are now. A Blight that can't Hugtech or go for crazy intricate hits will be forced to go for bump logic. You're always going to be better off outpositioning the survivor and bumping in the exact spots needed to guarantee the hits. This is what makes Blight so strong, because it is absolutely uncounterable. A Blight that never risks a hit will reposition you exactly where they need you to be, bait any dead hard or outrun any exhaustion perk you've got and leave no room for counterplay on the survivor side whatsoever. And think, if you remove things like the Hugtech, Blight players will be forced to go for the most optimal, efficient plays possible, because all of the risky yet fun ideas for both sides have been removed. If the survivor simply moves away from the Hug location even slightly, the hits won't connect and you'll be punished with a lengthy fatigue. A point that is often overlooked is newer players and specifically people playing on controllers. Blight is an extremely difficult killer to learn on mouse and keyboard, let alone leaving it all down to joysticks. When you're learning Blight, he can feel daunting, frustrating, and at times downright unplayable, and I get people all the time coming into my streams telling me they're struggling to play this character. But the Hugtech, once you get it down, alleviates all of those pinpoint precision issues that make it an extreme task to perform on controller. The Hugtech allows players to pick up the character, start having fun, and feel like they're actually doing something cool with him, even if the tech leads them to missing most of their shots and give the survivors a ton of options to counter. If anything, I view the Hugtech as one of the best accidental accessibility options we have, as it simplifies playing certain flat tiles and chasing survivors whilst also including the downside of being substantially less efficient than learning to play him conventionally. Having options such as bump logic, Hugtech's flicking, and using slippery collision to your advantage is what makes Blight fun, and why I think he's the most well-designed killer in the game. It's what makes the game exciting. Using his full arsenal of skills that are extremely mechanically demanding to end a chase is incredibly rewarding, and really makes you feel like the time you put into learning him was well spent. So if they do remove the Hugtech, what's gonna happen? Honestly, not a whole lot, really. A lot of new Blight players will become frustrated, he'll become substantially less interesting to play, and since he'll rely entirely on uncounterable movements, survivors will realize this and they'll start to hate going against him too. Blight would become nurse and would leave survivors with no option in a chase. These little techs and quirks are what makes the killer the most fun character in the game, and I would hate to see him being crammed into a specific playstyle. To summarize, Blight would not become weaker if they remove the Hugtech. In fact, he'd probably see an increase in kill rate over time. Survivors would very soon start to heavily dislike playing against him. Removing the Hugtech wouldn't fix how slippery he is on most maps, and it would make a killer who is already very difficult to learn even harder for new players. I feel like the Hugtech should remain in the game and become part of the charm it has in the same way as spinning or CJ techs, as it is in no way uncounterable, overpowered, or any of these things you hear survivors frequently mention. I hope you enjoyed the video, everyone. Share this video around if you want to raise some awareness on this issue. Let me know what you think down below, and as always, I'll see you in the next spicy video, dude.